Neither of them could escape. And finally, as the rain tapped lightly against the window again, Ethan broke the silence, his voice low and hesitant. "Laura, I'm sorry if I crossed a line." And Laura's throat tightened because she knew he hadn't truly crossed a line, yet she recognized the unsteady place they had both been in, and she spoke quickly, carefully. "You didn't, but we need to be careful. We're both hurting, and sometimes hurt makes us seek comfort in the wrong ways." And Ethan nodded, a mix of relief and embarrassment crossing his face, acknowledging the truth without argument. And later that day, Laura went for a long walk in the quiet streets, the rain now only a soft drizzle, letting herself feel the truth she had been avoiding, that in helping Ethan, in being there for him during sleepless nights and shared grief, she had leaned too much on someone who was also grieving, and that blurred the lines between care and something more, something neither of them wanted. And she realized that love, even when tamer, could complicate hearts if boundaries were not honored. And when she returned home, she quietly packed a small bag, leaving a note on the counter for Ethan. "I care about you deeply, but the best way I can honor your father is by protecting what's right. You deserve a future free of confusion and regret." And she left to stay with her sister for a few days, needing space to reset her own heart and thoughts. And as she drove away, she felt the mixture of sorrow and relief, knowing that stepping back was an act of care in itself. And Ethan found the note later, sitting on the counter where she had placed it, reading her words over and over, understanding her love and care, but also the wisdom in creating distance. And he felt the ache of missing her presence, but also a sense of respect, realizing that boundaries were not walls, but protection for both of them. And in those days apart, they both reflected on their emotions, their grief, and the need to heal, realizing that sometimes helping someone isn't just about being there in the moment, but knowing when to let go. And Laura, while away, journaled her thoughts, remembering the nights they had shared, talking, laughing quietly, and even the tense moments, all reminders that grief could bring people together in ways that were delicate and sometimes dangerous if left unchecked. And Ethan, walking through his days, felt lighter in some ways, understanding that her absence was not rejection, but an act of love, a way to honor his father and protect both their hearts. And slowly, a sense of calm settled in the house once more. Empty rooms no longer heavy with unspoken tension, but filled with potential for healing, for growth, and for the careful rebuilding of connections that could survive without confusion. And by the time Laura returned, the air was ready for conversation, ready for acknowledgement of feelings, without crossing lines, ready for two people who loved the same man to honor that love responsibly. And that night they spoke openly for the first time with clarity about grief, boundaries, and the future, understanding that care could exist without overstepping, and that some acts of love were shown not by presence alone, but by knowing when to step back. And as they went to bed, both felt a quiet relief, a sense that their hearts were safe, their emotions respected, and that the house, once heavy with sadness and tension, now held space for healing, hope, and a calm that both had longed for in the nights that had felt endless. When Laura returned to the house after a few days away, the air felt lighter, almost as if the walls themselves had exhaled in relief, and Ethan met her at the door with a quiet nod, a small but genuine smile that carried the weight of understanding and respect they had both earned. And the first conversation they had was different from any before. It was open, honest, and careful about grief, boundaries, and moving forward without guilt. And as they sat together in the living room, talking through memories of Mark, sharing stories that made them laugh and sometimes ache, Laura realized how much trust had been rebuilt, how much emotional distance had allowed clarity to return. And Ethan, in turn, felt the freedom to express sadness and gratitude without confusion, recognizing that Laura's care had never been selfish, only human. And over the following weeks, routines resumed, but with a new awareness. Mornings still held coffee and conversation, dinner still brought them together, but now the connection was balanced, nurturing without overstepping, comforting without creating doubt. and slowly the house transformed from a space of tension and longing into a home where respect and love coexisted peacefully, and Laura herself began to rediscover her life beyond grief, volunteering at a local community center, reconnecting with old friends, and embracing small joys she had once ignored, while Ethan prepared to return to college in Canada, feeling more prepared to face life without his father's immediate guidance, yet carrying Mark's memory with strength and pride. And before leaving, he hugged Laura, a gesture filled with warmth, trust, and the recognition of their bond as something unique yet appropriate. And in that moment, both felt a sense of closure mixed with hope, understanding that some connections heal hearts without needing to cross lines. And as Ethan left, Laura watched him go with a mixture of melancholy and relief, knowing she had done the right thing by stepping back when necessary. And that night, sitting on the porch, with the sunset painting the sky in soft golds and pinks, she allowed herself to feel peace for the first time in months, a calm born from wisdom, care, and restraint, realizing that helping someone doesn't always mean staying close forever, that some acts of love are measured in letting go, and that life continues with grief remembered but no longer controlling every heartbeat. And as she sipped her tea and breathed in the cool evening air, she knew that both she and Ethan could move forward with respect, healing, and quiet joy, carrying the past without letting it define them, and that understanding, delicate and profound, would guide them through every future sunset, every new challenge, and every quiet night in the home they both cherished in memory and hope.
The rain had been falling since early evening, steady and soft, turning the quiet Oregon street into a blur of reflections. And inside the Bennett house, the silence felt heavier than the weather outside, as if the walls themselves were still learning how to exist without Mark's voice, without his laugh, without the simple sounds that once made the place feel alive. And Laura Bennett stood alone in the kitchen holding a mug she had forgotten to drink from, watching the rain slide down the window while her mind replayed memories she didn't invite. Memories of dinners, arguments, jokes, and plans that would never be finished. And she told herself to breathe, to stay steady, because grief had a way of sneaking up when she least expected it, especially at night. And just as she turned away from the window, she heard a faint sound upstairs, a door opening slowly, followed by careful footsteps. And she knew before she saw him that it was Ethan, her stepson, awake again, unable to rest, carrying his own version of the same pain. And when he appeared at the top of the stairs, he looked older than his 21 years, his shoulders tense, his eyes tired, as if sleep had stopped offering comfort weeks ago. And for a moment, they simply looked at each other, unsure who should speak first, until Laura gently asked if he was all right. And Ethan shook his head with a small, honest motion that said more than words ever could. And she invited him down, not because she had a plan or advice, but because she knew what it felt like to sit alone with thoughts that refused to be quiet. And as he joined her at the kitchen table, the clock ticked loudly in the background, marking time neither of them knew how to use anymore. And Ethan stared at his hands before finally saying that he couldn't stop thinking about the last week of his father's life, about all the moments he had delayed a call, all the texts he meant to send but never did. And Laura listened closely, not interrupting, because she had learned that grief didn't need fixing, it needed space. And she shared her own regrets, small and large, the kind that only surface when it is too late to correct them. And in that shared honesty, the air between them softened, the tension easing just enough to let something fragile form, a sense of being understood without explanation. And the rain outside grew heavier as the night deepened, but neither of them noticed the time, because for the first time in weeks, the house did not feel empty. It felt occupied by memory and meaning. And when Ethan admitted that coming back home scared him because every room reminded him of his father, Laura felt a sudden urge to protect him from that pain, not as a mother, not as a replacement, but as someone who knew the weight of loving the same man and losing him. And she spoke carefully, telling him that grief didn't follow rules or schedules, that it came in waves, and that there was no shame in feeling lost. And Ethan looked at her, then really looked at her with gratitude and something else he didn't yet understand. And Laura felt it too, a shift so quiet it could be missed, like the moment before a storm changes direction. And she told herself it was nothing, just the closeness of shared sorrow, just two people leaning on each other in a hard moment. And yet, her heart beat a little faster than before. And when she stood to refill the kettle, she realized how late it had gotten, how easily hours had passed, and how rare it felt to talk without pretending to be strong. And as she returned to the table, she wondered briefly and uncomfortably whether helping him tonight was the right thing to do. But she pushed the thought away, believing that kindness could never be a mistake, even as the rain continued to fall and the night quietly set the stage for everything that would follow. The days that followed moved faster than Laura expected, as if the house itself had decided not to pause anymore. And each morning, Ethan was already awake when she came downstairs, sitting at the table with his laptop closed, staring into space. And without planning it, they began sharing quiet routines, coffee poured without asking, small nods instead of long talks. Yet something had changed after that night, something invisible but present, like a line drawn softly on the floor that neither of them mentioned. And Laura noticed how easily Ethan laughed when she teased him about burning toast, how his face relaxed when she asked about his classes or his plans to return to school. And Ethan noticed how different Laura seemed when she spoke about her life before Mark, her dreams that had been put on hold, the strength she carried without showing it. And though nothing improper happened, the emotional closeness grew in a way that felt both comforting and dangerous, because grief made people open in ways they never expected. And one afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the garage, they found Mark's tools, and the sight of them hit Ethan hard, his hands shaking as he picked up a worn hammer, and Laura, without thinking, placed her hand on his shoulder, grounding him in the moment, reminding him he wasn't alone. And Ethan leaned into that support for just a second longer than necessary, pulling back quickly with an apology that Laura waved away, though her heart felt unsettled. And later that evening, as the sky darkened early and the house filled with shadows, the power suddenly went out, leaving them in silence broken only by the rain. And Laura lit candles while Ethan checked his phone for updates. And they settled in the living room, the soft light changing everything, making the space feel smaller, closer. And Ethan spoke about his fear of moving forward without his father's advice, of becoming someone Mark would never get to see. And Laura responded honestly, telling him that Mark had always believed in him, even during arguments, even during distance. And her words stayed with Ethan, warming something inside him that had been cold for weeks. And as they talked, their voices lowered naturally, the night wrapping around them. And when Laura reached out to hand him a candle, their fingers brushed, a simple accident that sent a sudden awareness through both of them, and neither pulled away right away, not because of intention, but because they were tired, lonely, and human. And Laura felt a rush of guilt, even as she felt seen, and she gently withdrew her hand, standing up too quickly, pretending to adjust the curtains, while Ethan stared at the floor, realizing too late that he had crossed an emotional line he never meant to approach. And the rest of the evening passed quietly, words replaced by thoughts neither of them wanted to voice. And that night, Laura lay awake staring at the ceiling, understanding that grief had blurred her judgment, that she had leaned into comfort without measuring the cost. And she whispered to herself that this could not continue, that helping someone should never create confusion. Yet deep down she knew the truth was more complex, because helping had made her feel alive again, and that realization scared her more than the silence ever had. While upstairs, Ethan sat on his bed replaying the same moments, wishing he could take them back, wishing comfort did not feel so close to something else. and by morning, the house felt different again, not broken, but fragile, as if one wrong step could cause something important to crack. The next morning arrived heavy with unspoken tension, and Laura felt it the moment she stepped into the kitchen, the air thick as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, while Ethan moved around quietly, careful not to meet her eyes, his usual casual energy replaced by a stiffness that made every interaction feel weighted. And Laura busied herself with chores, folding laundry she didn't need to fold, washing dishes even when the sink was empty, anything to avoid the conversation she knew was coming. But avoidance only delayed what